Greetings, and let's go ahead and take a quick look at some custom work that I have done. Now, I did do this based off of the Dark Knight Returns Batman. That is the wave that did come with the Build-A-Horse. I actually ended up buying 4 of these figures, one to keep in package, one to display, one to display on the horse, and then now one to customize. Now, this really came along for a couple of reasons. I just had a little bit of inspiration, and also I wanted a Batman to match up with a Superman that I did, also from the Dark Knight Returns wave. Now, honestly, not too much work, just the painting. I thought what was really interesting was that I was able to touch up on the way to do washes and to do detailed work, like on the shadowing and the little wrinkles and folds in the costume. Now, what this does is actually add some depth to the figure. Instead of it looking all shiny and with that plasticky feel, this one kind of gives it a little bit of life to make it look a little bit more realistic. And I'll go through the things I learned from when I did the Superman to when I did this Batman, because it is rather interesting. Now that we're on the subject of repaints, McFarlane did release images today of the Dark Knight Returns Batman that is a Jokerized version. Now, we did already know that this was coming. I think there's also one more or 2 more coming in the next couple months. So it wasn't a big shock to me. Now, this is going to be another time that I buy another version of this actual body mold. The thing about that is that everybody should know already, I am a disgusting completist, which means that I must have at least one of every figure that is released by McFarlane. Now, I know for a lot of people, they are not that dedicated and they're not that sick in the head.
God, you're sick.
But I am. So I don't expect everybody to go out there and hunt down that Jokerized version of this Batman. And I have noticed that on the Target website, they still have that Jokerized version of the Dark Detective, which means that it didn't sell out or anything like that. You can procure it at your leisure, and that's pretty cool, because for me, I don't like to have to really hunt it down right away. If either it goes on sale or I could take a while to add one more of those for my inbox collection, then that just makes it a lot better for me. But as we should know by now, repaints and reuses are something that's never going to go away from any action figure line. NECA does it, of course Hasbro does it, everybody does it, because that's the way to get a more bang for their buck, because these molds are not cheap, they are really expensive. And I do kind of feel like we have gotten spoiled a little bit, because out of 10 figures, we'll get 8 that are brand new original sculpts. McFarlane also did recently release images of that Page Punchers wave that is all completely new sculpts. The Mr. Freeze from that wave looks really awesome. So honestly, when the line has to do some reuse or repaints just to get a little bit more value out of the money they pay to make the mold for these figures, it just really doesn't bother me. What does bother me a tiny bit, and that is reuse of the same body buck, like they've been doing with the 3 Jokers Batman body mold and also the John Kent body mold, because there's little sculpted differences that do not make that a plain body. So it's kind of hard to fidget in there to get different characters out of it. Now, I'm not going to complain too much about that, because, you know, a lot of other companies do the same thing, and we do receive a lot of original sculpts from McFarlane. But in the end, I think it's more something that each person can decide if they want to pick up a figure or if they don't. And also they decide what figures they are actually waiting to be released, which hopefully if the line continues longer, that gives us more chances to see way more different characters released from McFarlane. Now let's go ahead and get into this one. Let's take a look at it. Now, of course, the main thing from this figure is going to be the head sculpt. Now, I did end up ordering a different head sculpt online. They come like in this gray resin molded color that's good for repainting. The paint adheres really well to these. The only downfall from these is that they are hollow on the inside, so you do not have a neck peg. So you have to figure out a way to get articulation and get it to actually be usable onto the figure. Now there's different ways. You could use magnets. You could use epoxy to make like an inside with like a hole in it. But I have found my own way, and I'll explain a little bit of that, how I ended up putting this head to this body. But once I did get the head, I did repaint it in some matte black. I do love some either flat color or maybe semi-gloss to just give it a little bit of dullness. I'm not a big fan of shiny plastic. It just depends what it is or what character it is. Of course, that's the color I used on this head. Now, one of the hardest parts was the eyes. Had to really get down in there and just have two little specks. Now, on another figure, I had used pearl white to get like some reflectiveness. I think it was that fleck from the Flash Wave. But on this one, I went ahead and went a traditional, just enamel white with a little bit of gloss in there. Now, see where I mean that sometimes gloss can be used, but I just prefer a more toned down matte finish. Now then I went ahead and tackled the skin tone. What I ended up doing was mixing up a flesh tone and adding it. And once I let it dry a couple of days, I did go back and do the triple wash, which is 3 different colors of wash, one after the other, to like fill in the cracks and the different little bumps. It ends up giving the face a little bit more lines and shadows, so it just looks a little bit more realistic. But in the end, really happy with it. Now I did add the double ball inside there into the same port of the neck that comes with the figure. The way I did this was I actually had an extra Omega head, and the ball peg actually fit right into the one that originally came with this figure. But what you end up doing is you cut around the Omega. I think I even have the faceplate here. Yeah, I do. So I ended up slicing up that head all the way until you only have the actual part around the peg, but it fits inside the hollow resin head. It like slides up in there, and you can adjust the height of the head, freely. Here's that Omega faceplate that I cut off. Just kept it just for future use. Now, once you do that and you have it where it fits nice and snug and you can easily remove the head, then you do want to go ahead and glue it so that you retain that articulation without the head falling off and stuff like that. So you glue it, but then you push it down to where you want it to actually sit on the shoulders. You don't want it too low and you don't want it too high. And once you get that perfect fit, then you can just leave it there to dry and harden. And what that actually does is it gives you that free articulation. This guy does look down. Can also look up. The same as the original head. Probably even better. Of course, you can get right to left. You could still tilt his head for some attitude. So all that it does is give you all that free range at the head without having the head pop off or be loose. And to prove it, I can't pop this off and actually show you the peg inside there. With the Omega core, if you look in there, that's the Omega core that's glued inside of this resin head. And then you just pop it back into the neck hole, and you got that full range of articulation at the head. So pretty cool little process. I did learn some of that when I did the Superman head, which also I had to do the same thing to. And now when I do a resin head, I do have a technique to get a ball inside that joint. Now let's take a look at the wash that I did. Now, let me go ahead and bring out the Superman, just so I could kind of explain it. And when I did the Superman, I actually just went and did black and wiped off all the excess, your traditional wash. And it looks pretty good. I did end up adding like a little, like sporadic swipes from the paintbrush just to give it a little bit more texture and shading around like the shoulders and stuff like that. But what I learned was that you should actually try and do a couple of colors. So what I ended up doing to this Batman is I mixed a dark gray and did that first. So the dark gray went into the first recesses, into the sculpt work, and then I wiped it off, and that kind of gave me a little bit of a guide of where the crevices were more accepting of the paint to give you, that shadow in all the muscles and the fabric and all that. So once I did that, I let it dry, and then now I went ahead and did a black, where I could add the black into the deepest parts of the little cracks. And other parts that caught my eye, I just added a little, just a little different splashes of paint where I wanted to, and then I wiped off the excess again. Now this really works. It gives it a more used, gritty, tone to the costume, and at the same time it accentuates, all the folds in the cloth and stuff like that. But I wasn't happy with it completely because some of the original gray shiny plastic still poked through where I had done all of the wash. So I went ahead and did a sort of light gray mix, and then I just started flattening out any shiny parts that I really saw that like stuck out to me. I didn't want to go too crazy and just repaint it over again. But another cool thing I found out is that can actually help you to soften some of the black that you use. Like if it looks too wide, you can paint over it and make it a little bit thinner to make it more like line work instead of having just big blotches. That's what the Superman kind of has. He has a little bit of excess of black. So if I would have knew what I know, what I learned from this one, I would have actually gave this guy a little light blue wash, which in fact I could still do over the work I had already done to give the costume like light blue highlights, like on the shoulder, on the peak of the bicep and stuff like that. So we always learn when we work on these customs, and it is pretty fun, and it is also like a little bit of like therapy. It's kind of fun to just work on these and not really think about a lot of stuff going on in the world or in your life, problems that you may have. Really therapeutic. I really recommend it as, something fun that all collectors could do. Now, one of the main reasons that I did this was because the images that got me to do this figure was actually in The Dark Knight Returns, the graphic novel, when he takes a big old, jumbo gun away from one of the mutants that are like holding a kid hostage, and one of the punks is like, I'll kill him or whatever, and Batman's just like, boom, 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 like he just wastes him, and then he's like, I believe you. And now that moves on even into the animated version, which is one of my favorite animated DC movies, The Dark Knight Returns, and he does the same thing. You could actually see it in the scene. But this also was ported into Batman v Superman, when Batman saves Martha from the Lex Luthor goons in the warehouse, and the guy is like, I'll kill, or what did he say, I'll kill her or whatever, and Batman has already taken the guy and taken his big, machine gun, and then he says the same line, I believe you, and boom, boom, boom. So I wanted to add this big, I think I got this from She-Spawn, but I have so many guns now from the munitions pack that you can actually just, pick and choose what weapons you want to put. This is just the one that fit for me right now because it actually has a little bit of bullets like hanging from it. So I just got that cool feel for this dark, gritty Batman. And of course my whole plan in this was to actually put these two figures together as a little set. This Superman, came out pretty good. I could change some things to him. I probably will end up doing that little baby blue wash over the top, but I did also add the yellow S in the back. And like I say, there's always room for improvement, but look pretty good together. These will be going up on my custom shelf, but I'm pretty happy the way this guy came out with that full body wash that I did on him. Couple other things, even the belt. I also did a 3-color wash on the belt, which was a dark brown. Then I added a little bit of black in the cracks, and then a sort of yellowish brown to just wipe on top. Because of course this belt was also really plastic looking and gave off a lot of shine, and now it has a little bit more grittiness and accentuates a lot of the little buckles and cracks of like the leather pouches from the belt. So pretty cool. I also did the back, washed in all the wrinkles. It just brings a lot of character out of this figure that would normally look just like your basic plastic looking figure. But pretty happy with these. They are going to look awesome together, but you guys keep hunting out there, keep collecting, keep customizing, and I will see you on the next one.
They used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.